No one really knows like what is the
Yeah.
formula to the Mamba mentality.
With the Mamba mentality, he was extremely regimented. Like he was very routine and regimented and committed, which is difficult for most people, even the hardest working people. So he mastered that.
Welcome to Gifted and Guided, a community and podcast for entrepreneurs by an entrepreneur. We prioritize ourselves, and we also face the realities of the often overlooked and not so glamorous journey of entrepreneurship. But the best part, we're doing it together. Let's make it official. Subscribe, like, do all the things that they say to do. And now that you're officially a part of the Gifted and Guided community, you can call me Nye. But if you haven't subscribed, my name is Nialah. I'm your host and guide, and this is Gifted and Guided. Welcome back. I am so excited about our guest today. And her name is Raven Gerald. She is a mental performance consultant, athlete, writer, and mental health advocate. She works with athletes across sports, ranging from the youth to professional levels. And Raven assists athletes in a one-on-one setting and focusing also on the group with mental skills such as focus, goal setting, performance anxiety, amongst other things. And she's currently a sports and performance psychology doctoral student at the University of Western States. I mean, I don't know how you have time to be here, but thank you so much for being here, Raven.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you still referring to me as an athlete. But I
I
don't
mean,
know if I
okay,
can
so
take credit for that.
that's where this fun story comes in because we went to the same high school
Yeah.
and we didn't really necessarily know each other. That I only knew you through doing stats for like the women's basketball team, and we would go to school, and mind you, I did not play basketball, but my dad really wanted me to, okay, because I'm the
Yeah.
oldest, so he put me in every single sport as a kid: soccer, tennis, basketball, and
Had everything.
basketball was the one I hated the most. But I really enjoyed watching it. And one thing about Piscataway High School's women's basketball team, at the time, I don't know about now, at the time, you guys killed it. So that's why I was like, you're forever an athlete.
I appreciate that. But yeah, there were several good players who came through our school, both
For sure.
before, during, after, and yeah, I played with some really great players too. So yeah, we had some fun times. Some fun times.
Yeah, it was such a great team. And so we usually kick off every episode with a riddle, and it's typically around the topic. So I'm gonna start and give you some time to think about it. No rush. Okay.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. I'm a delay, a wait, a stall, a task I'll do, but not just now at all. I promise later, but never right away. A tricky habit, day by day. What am I?
My initial guess would be procrastination.
You are the first person to get this right.
Really?
You know what? And that's why you are the expert. Oh my gosh, yes, it's procrastination.
Do I get an award for this or something like?
I mean, the award is a clap.
Uh,
Wow, that is amazing.
wow.
Okay, I'm excited to get into this episode.
I like that. I mean, it's really credit to you. That was a great description. So I was able to.
No, shout out to AI. To kick us off, this quote is by Maston Kipp. He's an author. And it says, "Perfectionism is a dream killer because it's just fear disguised as trying to do your best."
Hmm.
And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Just fear disguised as trying to do your best. How many people can relate to that? Right.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that for sure.
It's and it says it's a dream killer, and it's true. I think a lot of people, especially in the media, you tend to see people like a Beyonce who is like always making sure, and she's a Virgo, so then she uses that too, always making sure everything is right. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, you want to make sure that things are in place and that you're doing it the right way. But I think it's also important to note that it can hold you back from executing, right? So
Sure.
can you talk about perfectionism from your lens? Because I think we know it from a general lens, but from the mental performance side.
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect topic for me personally, not just because of my, area of work and area of study, but because I have personal experience with this. Like I said, I raised my hand because I consider myself a recovering perfectionist because I've dealt with perfectionism for pretty much as long as I can remember. But as I gotten older, I've been able to just understand the root of it a little bit more and how to manage that and slowly but surely evolve out of that. So still in the process of that. But yeah, you kind of hit on it, and that quote hit on it, that it's really more times than not the root of perfectionism, especially in my lane of primarily working with athletes. The root tends to be fear and fear of failure more than anything, right? Like there's this fear of making mistakes, there's this fear of failing, there's this fear of not being good enough, there's this fear of not accomplishing whatever standards you've set out or set for yourself or whatever goals you've set out for yourself, right? So a lot of it does tend to be rooted in fear, but you're right. Like I think culturally we kind of present it as this really attractive quality,
Yeah.
and it can be tricky because it can and often does have a lot of positives for people, believe it or not. Like because you see a Beyonce or you see even just a regular person, typically someone who we classify as a perfectionist, usually what always comes with that is another quality called work ethic. And usually that person is like a really hard worker and they're really detail oriented and they like usually have all their boxes checked and their bases covered, so to speak. And that is honorable and usually can lead to a lot of favorable results. But there's a lot of things that come with that you know maybe aren't as favorable in terms of results. So I would say on the mental performance side of things, what I see a lot with perfectionism in athletes, and this could apply to just people in general, is a few things. Perfectionists are highly self-critical, usually, right? So just usually more critical to yourself and with yourself than you would be with someone else more times than not. So kind of holding yourself to a higher standard than you giving yourself less grace than you would give someone else. Um, there's this all or nothing thinking, as we call it. That's another
Yes.
trait here. So meaning it's either black or white, this or that. Like I have to achieve this or do this and do it this way, or I failed and it's not good enough. Right? There's no room for error or humanity in there. And then
Yes.
I would say the most major thing, and kind of the third thing there is there's a extreme connection to self-worth. So between what you do and who you are. So that fear of
That's a big
failure,
one.
that is probably the main one, I would say. That fear of failure usually comes from this pressure that you put on yourself to do something because it's so connected to who you are. I see myself through this sport, through this activity, through this business, through how well I can do, right? Your success and your failures dictate your self-worth. And that is obviously there's a lot of problematic things that can come from that. So I know that was a long.
Yeah. No, 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 no. And that's really important because, you know, I think that's where comparison will start to come in, right?
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
Because you have this, you're competing against yourself. You have a standard that by all means, like it's good to have standards, right? But if you're breaking yourself down by trying to reach that standard, it's not fair. And then you start looking around at what others are doing and those that you admire, or like let's say it's a business that you want to get your business to that same level.
Yeah,
Or if there's an athlete that's on the court and you're like, "Ooh, I love the way they do that and I want to also be
yeah,
there."
yeah,
Comparison then ends up becoming the thief of joy, right?
yeah.
So, I think as we talk about perfectionism going into this spiral of other things, what other things that can come out of that, like anxiety and so much more?
Yeah, you hit on one, a comparison. which we all deal with from time to time, right? We're human. We look to our left and our right every now and then. I think, again, the key word is management. Like, how are we able to manage that comparison so that it doesn't get the best of us and it doesn't linger and like hit our self-worth, like we just talked about. But yeah, I would say comparison's a big one. I have a lot of conversations with athletes about knowing the difference and walking the thin line between comparison and competitiveness.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, comparison is rooted more so in looking outside ourselves and using others as our standard, as our measuring stick, right? What in one way or another. Like, we feel like we're doing quote unquote better than someone or quote unquote worse, right? And
Right.
both of those can have a level of, for lack of a better word, toxicity to them, if, in some cases. But competitiveness is, as you put it, more rooted in where we are our own measuring stick. Our own potential is our measuring stick. It's rooted in some self-compassion, believe it or not. And even though that sounds like
The opposite.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you need some of that in order to grow. So, competitiveness is more about being the best you can be, and that may involve other people in the process, right? And competing against other people, but ultimately it's you, right? The look is inward.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and like you said, it can lead to obviously feelings of anxiety, which can turn physical. So, there's the psychosomatic effect, which basically just means that the psychological emotions and thoughts that you're dealing with lead to actual physical results in your body of pain, of, getting sick internally, right? So those things are on the table. Yeah, it could get
And you can't
it's like,
see that.
right. A lot of
That's the
times,
scary part.
yeah, yeah, and can lead to burnout on along those same lines. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think you talk about hustle culture
yeah,
and how a lot of people think like, oh no, I'm just going hard and making sure that this is right. And then you get to a point where, okay, it's launch day and you don't have the energy to even talk about the thing that you've been working on because you're
wow,
just so tired. And I've seen it so many times. And honestly, that's why this gifting guide even exists, because I have been on the back end for years working under executives,
yeah,
entrepreneurs and talent, and just seeing the same thing across the board. And it's like, at the end of the day, we're all human trying to figure it out. And we want to reach our potential, right?
yeah,
But sometimes we end up risking it all and making ourselves sick in the
yeah,
process.
sure,
And
sure.
it's not sustainable, if you will. So I have a
No,
question, because as you were chatting, I thought about Kobe Bryant and how a lot of people look up to him in his work ethic, but also like the way that his mindset just around being competitive, but also being an athlete and then some. And I'm curious, from your perspective as a mental performance coach, I'm sure you have done the research and you've analyzed him in some capacity. But what's your perspective on Kobe's work ethic and just like his point of view?
that's a great question. That's a great question. Because, first of all, I love Kobe and respect his game, his career, the whole nine. He's a
Mm-hmm.
legend for sure in a lot of ways. But that Mamba mentality that he promoted and that so many people followed, really, number one, let me say this first. This may not sound like politically correct, but to everything, there are exceptions. Like, you can
For
find,
sure.
even this whole conversation we're having, you could find somebody who seems to be at least like have gotten where they want to get and doing fine and break a lot of rules that we're
Mm-hmm.
discussing, right, in terms of
Right.
self-compassion and rest and recovery and all these things. And that is extremely rare though, and but it kind of is like, oh, a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Mm.
So I want to say that I'm not saying I've discovered or studied everybody in the world and everybody fits the mold, but the overwhelming majority of us, 99.9%, really we need to follow what we're talking about in terms of preventing burnout and all these things. So I say that to say, with the Mamba mentality, really what all Kobe was describing is, yes, a great work ethic of working really hard and harder than the next man, in his case. But he was extremely regimented. Like he was very routine and regimented and committed, which is difficult for most people, even the hardest working people. So he mastered that. He really mastered that. He also mastered what a lot of people call mental toughness, of pushing through pain, pushing through adversity, doing things that are uncomfortable, right? So when you kind of break it down that way, of really the things that he mastered and promoted, that is attainable for almost anyone. In whatever field you're in, whether it's sports or business or anything like that. He just did it with such in such an attractive way to a lot of people. You know what I mean? In terms of just the way he would attack it, that it's become a brand, right? But if you really shrink it down to what's at its core, it's a lot of what I teach to my athletes, and a lot of what mental performance, coaching is based around. Routines, right? Mental toughness or resilience, pushing through things, and commitment, right? A level of commitment, which kind of goes hand in hand with those things. So I kind of break it down like that in my mind. That is really what's at the root of it. And I'm not trying to minimize the power of Mamba mentality.
No, not you're explaining it to us. You're making it clear on like what it actually is, because to your point, it became a brand, but no one really knows like what is the formula to the Mamba mentality, and you just gave us the formula.
In my opinion, that is what, knowing what I know about Kobe and mental performance, kind of meshing the two. Essentially, he kind of broke, he had an elite level of commitment, an elite, regimen or routine, commitment to routines, and elite, adverse resilience, ability to push through adversity and things like that. And by elite, all I mean is above average, like significantly above average. So he was able to keep himself going to a degree that a lot of other people maybe didn't or weren't willing to.
And that makes me think about the importance of resources, because essentially you become a resource to athletes, right? You are their right hand when it comes to getting to that level and just to their peak, right? Their highest potential. And Kobe, clearly he had the means to be able to get support. And who knows, maybe he had a mental performance consultant that, especially at the beginning of his career, like just helping him get into that mindset, to then as he grew and got better, he was able to add on to that set routine and that set mental toughness. In that case, how does it feel being on that side after being an athlete and now supporting athletes in this way? It's like to know that you are a resource and you're essentially a vessel to help them walk in their purpose, to walk in their gift, and to be the best athlete on that field. Like, how does that feel?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying it that way. As I'm thinking about it, it is exactly that. Like, I do feel like I'm walking in my purpose of being able to help athletes from an angle of sports that has not been traditionally acknowledged, which is the mental side of things. Or if it has been acknowledged, it's been acknowledged just in one way, when really everybody's different. Every athlete's different. Every athlete has different needs. So I am really, really grateful, to answer your question, to be able to do the work that I do now. And to a degree, I look at it as I am now able to be who I wish I had, right? So I certainly could have used a mental performance coach along my journey more times than once.
I know some people are probably wondering, like, what's the difference between a mental performance coach or consultant and a therapist?
Because sports psychology is such a growing and evolving field still, it's come a long way, but it still has a ways to go in terms of just growth. There are a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about what this work actually is. So mental skills training or mental performance consulting, which is under the umbrella of applied sports psychology, that is building, working on mental skills that are associated with performance mostly. So now these skills are transferable, meaning they can be applied to other areas of life for sure, but they are geared toward improving or enhancing your performance. So confidence, focus, resilience, like I named, handling pressure, developing routines. Even as I name these things, you can hear these are like regular life skills, essentially. But even though we talk about them, or I do with my athletes, talk about them in the context of sports.
Right.
So it's based around performance enhancement and that side of well-being. A therapist or a counselor, so a mental health clinician, is someone who operates in the realm of mental health. So again, some of those skills I just named may be involved in these conversations, but essentially you are gearing these sessions or this work around like a healing or treating, I should say, treating usually some sort of mental health disorder, depression, generalized anxiety disorder, a host of other things it could be, right? So it's a more of a treatment type of approach there with mental health. So mental performance is performance, mental health is generalized mental health.
Right. So you have the execution side, then you have the healing side.
I'm trained to be able to recognize signs and things like that and then refer in those cases. So we work very closely together, and some people are dually licensed or dually trained, I should say, to do performance work and mental health work.
Okay. And that's great because it's needed, especially in the social media world. I love watching the draft. Mind you, I don't know who's who, but I enjoy watching the draft because I just get so excited to see people, like, their dreams coming true. Because I just know it took so much for them to get to that point, to get to the inside of the building, whether you're called or not, just to get inside the building. So, yeah, and I'm just going off tangent now, but it's related.
It's part of the overall experience, and that's a huge milestone for them. So
yeah, and to go through the world of social media where people are talking about you or saying all these things, and I think entrepreneurs can relate to that too, right? Because you put out your best work, or at least what you think is your best, and then you have others giving their opinion about, oh, this isn't good, the customer service sucks, or they might even think about, especially for early stage entrepreneurs, they tend to think about what others are going to think about them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, oh, I'm going to start this business. I'm excited. Yay. But then they start to get these negative thoughts in their mind because they think about, oh no, the people that grew up with me, they're going to see this, but I'm trying to attract new people too. So then it holds them back from actually executing. So I'm curious, like, what do you tell your athletes when they're getting ready to go on the...
Sorry.
No,
yeah, I was like, please don't do this. She always does it. Always.
Say hi.
No, literally, like, it's only when I'm on calls, but sorry about that.
No, you're fine. What do you tell your athletes when they're getting ready to go on stage, right? The field. Like, how there's a level of confidence that you have to go and perform in front of all those people that are watching, cheering, saying all this stuff to you. Like, how does that work?
Obviously for each individual athlete, like I said, everybody's different, of course. So it may differ slightly, but the general stuff that, I find myself saying, and the advice that I would give to anyone is, number one, control what you can control. And that sounds so cliche, but I call it the controllables, right? So focus as much as you can on the controllables. Can you hear me?
Second. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we're back.
It cut out for a second.
Can
you hear me?
You said control what you can... Yeah, I can hear you.
I would say, control the controllables. Focus as much as you can on what you can control. Right? Whether in a sports context, what is your role, what's your job, what's going on in that moment, what's important in that moment. And if you're presenting, right, you're giving a speech or something of that nature, what are you saying at that point? What type of engagement are you trying to elicit, right? So you do your best effort in terms of expressing that in a way that feels authentic to you, and in a way that's accurate with the information that you're giving out, right? Though that is what you are in control of. You're not in control of how the audience responds. You're just simply not. So the more energy that you spend on focusing on that, or even fixating on that, you're just wasting energy that you could put into the actual task you're doing. right? So just redirecting that focus and controlling your controllables. Secondly, I would say, of course, like you said, confidence, right? Now, part of confidence comes from managing that focus on controllables. Usually tends to make us more confident because the more you know you have a direct impact on something, the more confident you will be, right? So that focus plays a role. But also, I always say this simple, like 3-word phrase to athletes, and it's trust your work. Trust your work. So this is kind of what I would say is step 0. So before even the steps of when you're out presenting or when you're out performing, there's a step 0, which is prepare, right? Prepare, do all you can to prepare, get the shots up, get your swings in, get your, do your sprints, whatever, or do a few run throughs of your presentation, do the research you need to do for it, plan it out. And then once you've prepared to a certain extent where you feel comfortable, walk in that confidence and trust your work. Trust the work that you've put in, right? You're not adding anything to your ability to perform by fixating on every little thing at that point. You've put in the work and the time. So essentially, you're just leading yourself down a path of overthinking if you, if you worry about it. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think preparing comes first, then focusing on the controllables and, being confident by trusting your work.
As you talk about preparing, right? And we talk about perfectionism and putting the two together. I think a lot of people can, at least I've been here, of getting in that process of analysis paralysis, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm preparing, I'm getting ready to, but you never execute. Like I think there's a difference between preparing, practicing, and saying, again, perfectionism and trying to getting stuck in that phase of, I want this to be right, so the foundation has to be healthy. And then you never get to the next step.
Yeah.
Do you see that happen often? At least, I don't know if that's a common thing in the athletics.
A version of it is, I think, analysis by paralysis. I mean, I just look at that as hesitation. Like hesitation on the court, on the field, or whatever. Like, let's take, of course, the easiest examples I can give our basketball ones, right?
Of course.
That's just always my go-to. If you prepare and you work really hard on your ball handling or your shooting or whatever, but if you overthink it and again fall into some of that perfectionism we discussed, then when you're in an actual competitive in-game situation, you might hesitate to even shoot when you're open, although you just put up 500 shots, right? But you're not trusting that work because you're overthinking and you're a little paralyzed by analyzing, oh my gosh, what if I miss? Am I open enough? Did it? Like a bunch of thoughts, again, a bunch of uncontrollable thoughts are going through your mind, or thoughts about uncontrollables, I should say, are going through your mind. And that leads to, often overthinking leads to hesitation, which leads to inaction, right? So, then you may not even take the shot, or you may take it, but then it's after like 3 hesitations and, so it's the same thing I think with being a business owner or, an entrepreneur of any sort. Is like, yeah, okay, you put together a plan. Right. Cool. But then tweaking every little thing so that it's perfect or feels perfect. That's where you draw the line between the balance of preparing and over preparing. It was like, At a certain point, you say, okay, I'm going to go with what I have. I truly believe at a certain point, you can't even get proper feedback unless you take a step. Right? I have a business plan in front of me, but people won't even be able to get, or not even people, I won't be able to get feedback to even grow this and make it better if I don't do some stuff. Doing some stuff, the activity part is the part that's actually going to make me realize, okay, I could tweak this. Okay, this works well. Okay, right? So it's the same thing to me in sports, and with that is like there is a step or 2 or 3 that needs to be taken before you can even progress.
To your point, you said, that's how you can get feedback. That's how you can get better. But when you're a perfectionist, I guess it's like, is getting better? I don't know.
No, you're right. You're actually right on point with that because that goes back to what we initially talked about that fear of failure. So feedback almost feels like I failed, right? Like I didn't nail that perfectly. If somebody can give me feedback of something that can be improved, I missed it. And it's like, no, that's good because there is no such thing as perfection, obviously. So that's number one. There's always room to improve at everything. And you were able to get that. And now you can actually move forward improving rather than sitting and doing nothing because you don't want to experience that failure. So yeah, you're right on the money with that. I think that sometimes that hesitation can be like, I don't even want to get feedback from others or from myself, from putting myself out there.
Right.
No, because it's viewed as such a negative thing, right? If perfection is the goal, then yeah, any sort of feedback is negative.
Right. Right. And it then leads us to never executing,
Yeah,
and then people, whoever is supposed to benefit from that thing you're supposed to do, they'll
yeah,
never get it. And I always encourage people to put it out there, specifically with the entrepreneurs who are public facing and want to be on camera, because there are a few that don't.
yeah,
I
of
always
course.
encourage them to tell your story, show up, and even if it's not the best first video, you
Yeah,
still did it, right? And I
yeah.
think someone said get used to being in that first draft phase
Oh,
where
I love that.
you're always just tweaking it, and when you think about a college paper, it's
Yeah,
like you're always adjusting it. You go to office hours before you can submit that final paper. Throughout the semester, you're constantly working on getting the research, getting the paper set up, and then you submit it for that final exam.
yeah.
So I guess life has its way of teaching us or preparing us for things later on, huh? I guess school, it was worth it.
Okay, we took something from school.
Something, yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that, being that I'm technically
No, no, no,
still
no,
a
no.
student. But yeah, no. But yeah, we learned something, I guess. No, you're
We learned.
absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting if I could just add briefly to what you said. Even I'll be very transparent in this moment and even say things like this, like me speaking to you and being looked at as like an expert or someone who has some sort of, knowledge about a certain topic enough for someone to want to talk to me. That takes a level of like getting past that rough draft stage into the first draft stage. Like I may say something like, there's thoughts that go through my head that's like, well, am I actually like qualified enough? Should I, take this step, or maybe I should wait till I actually graduate, or I do this like this
Yeah.
other person did, or whatever. Like, of course, those thoughts come, but again, along these same lines of what you were talking about with the entrepreneurs you work with, like, no, I'm taking a step toward, whatever's down the road for me to be able to even progress in the field of speaking or in the arena of speaking and doing other things and spreading the knowledge and giving the gift that I have to offer to people. So if I were to wait for it to be perfect, I wouldn't even be sitting here because I'm sure I'm gonna say something. That's like,
Listen, I mean, I'm joining you on that boat, okay? Because I hated public speaking for majority of my life. And it wasn't until this year where I was forced into it. God was like, I'm going to have you do this thing. And then
yeah,
after that, it was like, oh, now I'm going to have you travel and speak. And I'm
wow,
like, wait a second. And you want me to teach a workshop? I've never done that. I've
yeah,
constantly been put in situations where I've had to step outside my comfort zone.
hmm,
But what helped me was realizing that it's not about me. And also, I'm not doing it alone, right? So even with this podcast, it's just like I have absolutely been in that analysis paralysis phase for the past few months of, okay, we're going to launch this month. No, 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 no. We got to push it back. Okay, wait, we'll do it this month. It's just a constant battle of, and basically everything you've been talking about is like, yeah, I've been there. I've been dealing with that with this brand specifically. But
yeah, yeah.
even
That's great.
though things may not be perfect, I'm still executing because I'm just like, I have to start somewhere. And in the words of the great Kiki Palmer, at least is what she said recently at her speaking event. She said, nothing happens if nothing happens.
There you go.
And it's
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
So it's like you have to put it out there. You have to expect the feedback and not see it as a personal attack, but if anything, it's just helping you get better because that's how you grow.
yeah, yeah,
And when it comes to an athlete, I mean, they have a coach, right? That's giving them feedback on how they're performing on the field during the game. With entrepreneurs, we don't really have a coach. I mean, unless you hire someone, but for the most part, you're going based off of your own ideas, thoughts, maybe your team, talking to God or whoever your spirit guide is, right?
yeah.
That's
No, great.
hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And like you said, there's a lot of transferable skills from sports that are, really applicable to life. But one of them is, you do get used to at a very early age, for a lot of people who go on to play sports for years, you get used to being coached, hopefully, right? And to a degree and with that comes like direct feedback, not always in the most pleasant way either.
Right.
You get adjusted to like hearing things and having to make a change and apply that feedback, whether sometimes whether you agree with it totally or not, right? But it does ultimately work together to help you grow, and progress in some way, hopefully. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. I guess entrepreneurs or business owners, especially if you weren't a former athlete or you didn't have any other setting that directly provided that, it can be a little bit more difficult to, I guess, muster that up or kind of get in that mindset of embracing that. For some people, some of it's dependent on personality too.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Okay. So as we speak about getting used to things and adjusting, are there any tips that you have when it comes to reframing negative thoughts and beliefs? And I know that that might be tough because it might be situational. So a general way of, if someone's in a situation where they're like just going through this process of self-doubt and analysis paralysis,
Yeah, yeah.
how do they gather that?
Reframing thoughts, negative thoughts, or as I prefer to call them, unhelpful thoughts. And I use the words helpful and unhelpful rather than positive and negative more often than not, just because they're a little more straightforward and black and white and less judgmental. Because, a lot of times, especially if you're a perfectionist or something like that, the word negative can feel like that end of the world. And then you're beating up on yourself, not only for not doing that thing or doing that thing, but also for having the negative thoughts about it. And now we're in a negative spiral, right? So I'll offer this tool called the 3Cs, which I cannot take credit for. It's kind of like a little tool in sports like that I offer to a lot of athletes, but I think it can be helpful. So if having unhelpful thoughts, the first step is actually to notice it and to be aware, as obvious as that sounds, but develop a self-awareness about yourself to know when this is happening. That's a really important step. And obviously it takes some intentionality to increase your self-awareness, but it's obviously it's part of the process, I think, of even running your own business or doing anything performance-wise, right? So the first C in the 3Cs is called catch it. So like I said, noticing, having an awareness, like, okay, I'm in a negative thought pattern right now. I'm having an unhelpful thought. Okay. The second C, I'm sorry, is called check it. I think of this as like the filter C. So a water filter, of course, gets kind of the junk out of the water, the dirt, the bad things that we don't need, right? And so this is the C, that where you're checking the thought, you're putting it through that filter, and you're like, is this helpful? And of course, if we're to this point, it probably is not, number one, but also like, why is it not? I think that helps with increasing your self-awareness long term, is understanding like why am I having these thoughts right now? So a lot of times it could be all the things we talked about just this perfectionism, and I'm holding myself to this really high self-critical standard that's not helpful to my results. A lot of times it can be we are simply like exaggerating a situation. That's a pretty common one. So we kind of blow something up out of proportion in our mind about a situation that's really truthfully not that bad if we like look at it for what it is. So just checking it is kind of like evaluating, okay, yes, this is not helpful, but like why is this not helpful? It might not be true, it might be exaggerated, it might be highly critical. And then moving on to that third C, which is change it, which is self-explanatory. Change it. So catch it, check it, change it, which is simply shift that thought without judgment, shift that thought from something that is unhelpful to helpful. So this is why I tell athletes a lot of times, and I would say the same to entrepreneurs, have some helpful self-talk statements in your back pocket, so to speak, available to you. So you don't necessarily have to memorize a bunch of these, but just have like one or two that are helpful to you. So if you struggle, that's where that check it comes in. If you understand yourself and you know that you struggle, particularly with being highly self-critical, maybe it's something that shows some self-compassion to you in that moment. Maybe it's something as simple as, like I said earlier, hey, I'm having these negative thought patterns. I'm having these second guessing self-doubt thoughts. I'm in analysis paralysis. I'm stuck. Maybe it's simply something simple like trust your work. Remind myself, trust my work. That's how I'm going to change that thought to make it a confident one.
Wow.
Right. So the three C's
Mhm.
of self-talk would be my suggestion there.
I mean, you are more than qualified. You are more than qualified. You are such an expert, and I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I appreciate you sharing all of this insight, because these are things that people can take away and like actually apply now. And that was what I saw in you when I saw you post your BTS video when you were at the conference. I was like, wait, I would love to learn more, because I know that she knows so much. You've taken the time to study this space, and because of that, you have a lot to share. It's just about someone bringing it out. So I just want to affirm you and just say, like, you are an expert, and I can't wait to see all that you do and the stages that you're on, because I'm learning a lot, and I'm like, okay, taking notes. I need to figure out what my two things are in my back pocket, because then in that case, it's like it allows you to keep going,
Yeah.
and even when it's hard, it's like, all right, I'm gonna be delusional, quote unquote, right, like they say, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna just believe the best and just step into it even if I can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a little bit of delusion that's needed, and I also tell athletes, and I would tell again anyone this. Also, if start out small. If the big wild stuff like doesn't resonate with you, because there are some people who shut down with those big dreams and stuff at first, because this is habit shifting. Like, these are thought habits. So like any other habit, it is tough to jump from a habit that you had for years, and then just switch that the next morning when you wake up just because you watched a video on TikTok or something like that told you should do this, right? It's not that easy, and I don't think we acknowledge that and give ourselves enough grace with that. Like, yeah, it's going to take steps to shift your your mindset habits, just like it takes time and a process to shift any other habit. So I say that to say, if it's okay if you don't want to jump straight from I'm struggling to believe in myself to I'm going to conquer the world tomorrow. Okay, just let's start with a thought like trust your work. Then let's graduate to a thought like I'm going to be the best at this, and I'm going to achieve this number this year, right? And this amount of revenue, whatever it might be, right? You can graduate in your self-talk as well, because I think it is important that you actually to some degree believe what you're saying. Because a lot of people check out. I've noticed a lot of my athletes will tell me straight up, well, I don't like that fluffy stuff that sounds like you got this. Like, I need something real in that moment. I'm like, I feel you. So say something real. Say something that resonates with you. Right? There's,
Correct.
you know what I mean? When you think about your one or two statements in your back pocket, make it applicable to you, personal to you, and make sure it resonates with where you are right now. And then get to that next step where you've grown in confidence just enough to have like a slightly more risky self-talk statement, right? It's
Ooh,
okay.
risky.
Yeah, yeah, right? Honestly. So I want to say that too, because that's another thing I don't think is popular, is to just acknowledge like, hey, maybe I'm not quite there yet, but I can still take steps toward whatever there is.
Raven, again, thank you so much for being here today and giving us the gift of insight, wisdom, and knowledge around mental performance. I think everyone they've been taking notes. You shared a lot of gems, so we appreciate you. But I don't want to be greedy, but I do want to ask if you could give us another gift, a gift that keeps on giving,
Yeah.
and that could be a journal prompt. It could be a question for reflection. Or even an activity, anything that you think would be helpful for our audience to take away to use for reflection.
Yeah, I think my gift is very simple, but hopefully it's powerful and it's lasting for everyone.
Simple is good.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a simple gift.
Yeah, I mean that's the nature of the work I do. It should make things more simple, not more complicated, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but so I want to leave people with this question to consider if they haven't already. What is your why? Your WHY, right? What's your why? As simple as of a question as that is, it can be complex, right? And I think it's one that we sometimes might not think about in the day-to-day as much as we should, maybe, in times. So your why, of course, means why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? And I would say start with whatever you consider to be your goals are, or your purpose, so to speak. So if you have a certain goal or a couple of goals set out for yourself, really sit down and ask yourself why. Why do you want this? And I think where that can be helpful is down the road, you will, as a human being, struggle with motivation. You'll struggle with discipline, even if you're a highly disciplined person at times. There will be obstacles and challenges, of course, and all of these things. There will be maybe a little bit of self-doubt here and there. That's okay. Again, you're human. But I think coming back to that why and reminding yourself of that on a pretty consistent basis can be a really helpful driving force to keep you going, even through adversity. So I think one of the keys to resilience is just knowing your why, and maybe even putting that up somewhere where you can visibly see it and remind yourself. Because I tend to think that's at the core of a lot of what we do day to day.
It seems like asking the question why gets you to that core too. So to your point, it's like, okay, what's my why? What are my goals? Why? And it's like constantly asking why to get to what it is. And maybe you might have a reflection moment of realizing like, oh, this is actually not my goal, somebody else's.
I was going to add that with the power of elimination there too. Like you get to kind of cross off some stuff that you thought was so important, and you realize, well, I'm sitting down with this now and thinking about my why, and there's not really one, or it's really tied to like outside factors that aren't connected to my actual driving force, that aren't going to keep me going. Like you said, somebody else's goal, somebody else's dream. It could be something that you realize is kind of superficial too, right? So yeah, it's helpful for elimination too.
Yeah. Wow. This has been great. Again, Raven, I can't thank you enough. I know I've already done it like 2-3 times, but I'm going to do it one more time. I appreciate you. And again, thank you for taking the time to chat with us, to share your insight, and to be transparent, but also just make it so easy to understand, because it's one thing, to your point of just talking about your why, it's like one thing to say that, but then you break it down for us to really think about, well, what does that look like and how do I apply it? So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying all of that, and I appreciate you, and you affirmed me. I want to affirm you. I love seeing people walk in their purpose and do so gracefully and through all the highs and lows of it. So it's been really fun to watch your journey, and I'm excited to continue doing so. So keep going.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm a play that over and I'll be like, all right. It's always nice
that on a loop.
those reminders, like, all right,
Yeah,
keep
of course.
going. But no, I will
good.
be listening to this episode again, because I want to be able to apply that as I continue to walk into new spaces that are unknown and just, scary to tap into. So with that being said, we will absolutely have you back. And I'm sure by then you would have had so many more experiences. And who knows, once we have a retreat one day, I would love to have you on site. Let's go to an island, or maybe Italy. I don't know. We'll see. But either way, I'm so excited for what's to come. And this is not the end. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gifted and Guided podcast. Be sure to follow us on all social platforms at The Gifted and Guided. And make sure to DM us and email us. We want to hear from you. This is a community that we're building together. Until next week, may your cup overflow as you mind your business and walk in purpose. This is Gifted and Guided.